Welcome to the Centuries of Sound radio podcast. This one is from July 2019, covers the year 1909 and features Dave Hammond. If you want to get hold of these a year earlier and also get full downloads of mixes and a load of other bonus stuff, then why not sign up to my Patreon at patreon.com/centuriesofsound for just $5 per month. Right now my supporters there are listening to the show on 1920 featuring Janiver Magnus. That's patreon.com/centuriesofsound. Anyway, here's 1909.
On Cambridge 105 Radio.
Hello and welcome to Centuries of Sound, the show where we take a deep dive into a year in the history of recorded music. My name is James Errington. I run centuriesofsound.com, where I make the mixes these shows are based on, and today I'm joined by
Dave Hammond of the Smelly Flower Pot on Cambridge 105 Radio.
So tell me something about yourself and your show, Dave.
Something about myself. Well, as you probably gathered, I'm not local.
Fair enough. I'm not myself as well. So
well, we'll swap story. I'm from Hull originally, but moved down to this neck of the woods probably about 16 years ago.
Okay.
And first presented the show on Cambridge 105 Radio just over 7 years ago. So I've been doing the Smelly Flower Pot for about 7 years, and the show is, if you take John Peel as a rough template of just wanting to play new and unfound and unheralded bands.
Okay,
and
that's great.
Pretty much the template that the show is, and I do like to play a lot of local bands as well.
That's great. There's John Peel is a good template for all of us. Something I've kind of tried to follow a bit myself.
Yeah.
Okay, so this time on Centuries of Sound, we're going back to the year 1909. So what's your expectations of music and other recorded sound in the year 1909, do you think?
I've come along without any expectations whatsoever and with an absolute open mind, and this will be fascinating for me because, as I said, I just listen to, generally 90% of the time, listen to brand new music, so it's great for me to delve into something from the past.
Just for an overview of what kind of period we're in now, I think people would associate this time, the time before the First World War, with ragtime. Mm-hmm. I think that's a word that kind of crops up a lot. What's your idea of what ragtime sounds like, do you think?
Right, well, I've got a little bit of experience of rag music through supporting Hull City football team.
Right, okay.
Right, and the weird thing is, going back to the 1950s, and I've seen some clips on YouTube of this, and it looks fantastic. But going back to the 1950s, when Hull City were a well-supported team, and they used to fill the old Bullfrey Park up to the rafters, and it was the old stands, the old terraces, and the players used to come out to Les Paul and Mary Ford's Tiger Rag.
Okay.
And that used to play over the tannoy as they were coming out. But as the players were coming out and that was playing, used to have all the fans on the terraces doing the old knees up Mother Brown thing to the Tiger Rag. So yeah, I guess that was my first instance of coming across rag music. And then I believe Scott Joplin was...
Scott Joplin is the most famous guy. I think when we hear kind of Scott Joplin rags, we think about it's all piano-based music.
Yeah.
So it's got a melody and a counter melody. That's the kind of way we think about it. Which is how a lot of ragtime was, but as far as recorded ragtime, generally speaking, it's songs, kind of pop songs, or band music, so like marching bands. That's the two kinds we have, really.
Yeah.
So let's have an example of that. This is Eddie Morton, and Eddie Morton was the singing cop, because up until 1905 he worked for the Philadelphia Police Department as a policeman.
Right.
But he decided to quit that to have a career as a singer. He's one of the most famous singers of this time. So, here he is with Wild Cherries Rag.
Talk of your loony coons, talk of your spoony coons, the lover of croony tunes. Jackson was the leader of a big brass band, finest in the land, understand, music it was grand. While at the ball one night loosened him off, and White yelled out with all of might when he started playing some familiar tune. She just cried with delight. If you love your babe, play that tune for me. I'm gone crazy, that rags a daisy. I just can't make my feelings behave. Play that tune again, mighty soon again. When I hear that string wind to cry again, play me that wild cherry rag. If you love your babe, play that tune for me. Just because I feel so funny, honey, I don't care for money. I'm going crazy, that rag the daisy. I just can't make my feelings behave. Play that tune again, mighty soon again. Honey, don't you start to scold, I'm feeling like a 2-year-old. When I hear that string wind to cry again, play me that wild cherry rag. Talk of your wedding chimes, talk of your champagne wines, talk of your scandalous times. Mr. Jackson married Miss Lucinda White. Indeed he did last Sunday night. Oh, you kids! Just as the knot was tied, Parson had blessed the bride. Jackson stood by her side when the music played that love and wedding march. Miss Lucinda just cried. If you love your babe, play that tune for me. I'm gone crazy, that rags it easy. I just can't make my feelings behave. Play that tune again, mighty soon again. When I hear the string wind to cry again, play me that wild cherry rag. If you love your babe, play that tune again. No, I'm not a blowing, honey, I just feel like going somehow. I'm gone crazy, that rags it easy. I just can't make my feelings behave. Play that tune again, mighty soon again. Oh, you 7 come 11, honey, I'm going straight to heaven. When I hear that string wind to cry again, play me that wild cherry rag. Oh, you bet it.
Right, so that was Wild Cherry's Rag, a version of that by Eddie Morton, and it's a song written by, the words were written by Irving Berlin.
Oh, right, okay.
As well. So not one of your. He's a Tin Pan Alley writer rather than like a proper ragtime writer. Yeah. But at this point, ragtime is the preserve of kind of Tin Pan Alley. It's gone over there now, so that's kind of fair enough. So is that a bit different from the ragtime music that you might expect? What do you think?
Probably what I noted from that is very playful. You know, it's sort of quite humorous, very playful kind of song. It's not a song to be taken too seriously.
No.
But incredibly catchy as well.
Yeah, I mean that was their deal at Tin Pan Alley. They're just writing these tunes that the old grey whistle test, I think, comes from there, doesn't it?
That's right.
That kind of idea.
That's right.
Yeah. I think that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
But I think they had all these kind of novelty effects on the trombone, kind
that's
of funny sounds on trombone and things. That's from Burt Williams. That was a pioneering singer at this time. He had that kind of backing behind him, and it seems like everyone was trying to copy that.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah.
Let's have one more rag. This is the American Symphony Orchestra. Sounds like they're going to play classical music, but no. The orchestras, bands at this time seems to be kind of an interchangeable kind of thing. When they were first recording 4 or 5 musicians, they called it a parlor orchestra because they needed a new name for that.
Right.
But we kind of call that a band by this point, even, I'd say. So it's a decent-sized group of people, but maybe just 10 or so, because they are recording into a huge. So if you think of a Victrola gramophone, gigantic brass horn that's going into a curtain, and then you have various different musicians sitting around the room. The instruments that are louder are further away, and the quiet instruments are right next to it. And if you've got some instruments that you need to vary the level, a singer, for example, you've got them on a wheeled chair and someone's pushing them backwards and forwards. So that's the setup where this kind of band are playing. So this is American Symphony Orchestra, they're called. right, so that was the black and white rag. Did that sound familiar at all?
It did. And me being of a certain age and watching television in the 1970s.
Exactly.
Yes.
Do you know which programme that was?
Well, for those with the black and white TV, the red ball is the one next to the yellow ball.
That's the quote, yeah. It's the theme to the snooker later on. And it was the theme to the snooker in the form performed by Winifred Atwell. Because she was a popular lady who played piano in the 50s. So she would release medleys of old tunes on the piano.
Yeah.
And her version of it was used as the theme tune to Pot Black.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah. Now, I think, if I remember right, because you mentioned earlier on before we went on air about Winifred Atwell, and it sort of struck a chord with me. And I seem to remember, and I might be wrong on this, but I seem to remember she was the first black woman to have a hit record in this country, or possibly even a number one or something like that.
She had a couple of number ones, in the 50s. So it's quite likely. I'm thinking who else it would be. I can't think of anyone else it would be.
Yeah, well, it certainly struck a chord when you mentioned it.
Yeah, so, she's important later on, kind of a strange figure. We think of the 50s as like rock and roll and things like that, and jazz, but there was a lot of other stuff going on at the same time.
Yeah.
And of course the British charts didn't start till 52, so lots of records being broken and made at that time.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, let's think about the general world of things that were going on in the year 1909. We have flying. Lots of flying going on at this point.
Yep.
The Wright brothers, a few years earlier, had their first plane, and now everyone wants to have a go. So flying seems to be kind of the theme of the time. And lots of kind of 5 years previously, you've got lots of novelty songs about cars, and now you've got loads of novelty songs about planes.
Right.
So here's one of these. It's called "Take Me Up with You, Dearie," and is it about a plane? Have a listen to the words and what kind of aircraft are they travelling in, because I'm really not sure.
When sweet Molly Ryan declared that aeroplane riding she dared, her sweetheart began to think of a plan where they could be wed overhead. So he said, I will get an airship right away, a small one to hold about two. Then smiling with joy, she said to her boy, you're the captain and I am the crew. Take me up with you, dearie, away up to the sky. Sail around the moon for a quiet moon, just apart and you and I. Let us float through the clouds and just have a lot of fun. We'll go up as two, and then come down as one. Now Molly goes up every day, while Bonnie, her sweetheart, must stay alone down below, where messages go of wireless love to his dove far above. And then Molly replies, don't you see, just 3 letters, C, Q, and D. Their meaning is clear, it's do hurry, dear. Then he answers, oh, please wait for me. Take me up with you, dearie, away up to the sky. Sail around the moon for a quiet moon, just apart and you and I. Let us float through the clouds and just have a lot of fun. We'll go up as two, and then come down as one. Take me up along with you, my darling, do, and let us go away into a latitude about as near as anybody that has ever reached the sky. We can sail around the lunar planet, making love and hugging every time we can, and with nobody in the aeroplane except apart from you and I. We could float a little, flying boat a little, while we rode a little, send a note a little, subsequent to passing through the clouds and having lots of fun. We'll go up into the sweetest sky of blue, and on ascending we will figure up a two, but on returning to old terra firma we will be as one.
So that was called Take Me Up With You, Dearie, and that was a guy called Billy Murray with the Haydn Quartet.
Right.
Not Bill Murray, Billy Murray, very popular singer at this time. So what did you make of that? I think it's quite odd.
It is, especially when it goes into that sort of rapid fire thing at the end. I wish I had the lyric sheet so I could have understood everything she was saying in that.
It's
almost like a rap, isn't it?
It is. It's quite a lot to unpack there, I think.
Yeah.
As I said, I don't know what kind of... First it's an aeroplane, then it's an airship, and then it can go around the moon.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like they understand the physics of air transport particularly well at this point. But
no, there was a mention of 3 letters as well, but I couldn't quite figure out what those letters were. And what
yeah,
they meant.
And I'm not sure if there's any kind of... There are lots of kind of innuendos going on in these songs, and it was
and downs and
it was the Edwardian era where they were all into that kind of thing. It was the summer before the Edwardian summer before the First World War.
Right.
So, but I don't know what that meant.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody listening can tell me.
Yeah, please help us.
Limited information about this song in particular. This is not something that's a lot of information out there about it. So this is from the USA, and right now the music industry in the USA is all based around New York. It's all Tin Pan Alley and environs, really. So one thing that's kind of based on is the vaudeville stage.
Mm-hmm.
And vaudeville is good for us because they have comedy as well as just songs. Because in England, there's kind of much more song-based and less stand-up routine-based. So I'm going to have a listen to some comedy from this time and see if it's still funny.
Yeah.
Of course, the attitudes represented in these songs are not, on these comedy routines are not necessarily to be. They're not my attitudes necessarily. Some slightly outdated things. This is, if you think about what's going on in the USA at this time, you have to kind of bear that in mind. So first of all, this is a guy. He was called Joseph Tunnicliffe Pope Jr., but he recorded as Murray Cahill. He was a very prolific recording artist, making a lot of these comedy cylinders and records at this point.
Well, here I am once more on the rostrum, whatever that means. I was going to take for my subject this evening connubial bliss, whatever that means. I was going to talk on married life, but I'm afraid to, for I married a red-headed woman. Why, actually, my wife's hair is so red that when she goes in the backyard at night, the chickens take it for a sunrise and the roosters commence to crow. So I'll not talk on married life. But you've all heard that old joke that while it costs $10 to get a dog license, it only costs $2 to get a marriage license. In other words, it costs more to be a dog than it does to be a married man. Well, that's correct. So my advice to the young folks is take a chance and get the marriage license. It's just as good as a dog license, and 9 times out of 10 you lead a dog's life anyway. And besides, you save $8. And while you're leading a dog's life, 8 bones come in handy. So I'll not talk on married life. But there's one thing that's dear to married life, and that's the children. The children are dear. They keep us broke. But we all love the babies, the rattling, prattling babies. Some love girl babies and some love boy babies. I love girl babies, all the way from 18 to 40 years of age. So I'll not talk on married life. But I married my wife in Africa. I was in Africa raising chickens. I did very well raising chickens in Africa. I've raised as many as 25 and 30 chickens in a single night. That is, if it was a dark night. But finally she lost her job, and I came to the conclusion it's impossible for 2 married people to be happy together. That is, if they're married to each other. So I'll not talk on married life. But when you do get married, stick by anti-race suicide and raise a large family. That is, if you have an elevator in a house. But remember, sufficient of to the evil there is one baby. And don't, as long as you're ever in your right mind, pray for twins. Twins are equal to a permanent riot, and there isn't any real difference between triplets and an insurrection.
All right, so there's Mr. Murray Cahill with a talk on married life.
He was a cheery chap, wasn't he?
Yeah. I think there's kind of Bob Hope, Marx Brothers, comedy routines. I can hear a bit of that in there.
Yeah, and I was thinking even later on, I was thinking he could have been that era's John Cooper Clarke.
Yeah, with the poem.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, kind of droll kind of delivery there.
That's right.
On that.
Yeah, and a little bit, close to the edge with some of the comments. A little bit un-PC.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I think he wasn't really concerned about anything of that line, but it could have been worse. That's what I'd say. It could have been worse. Let's hear something a bit worse. This is another comedian who's got a similar pseudonym. He was not really called Nat M. Wills. If you can have a look, Nat M. Wills online, what he looks like, because he's dressed in his tramp persona, which is quite a sight to behold. He did humorous or satirical musical numbers, including parodies of popular songs.
Last year, Horton started to reduce. She took some stuff called Cinnabona, $5 a bottle. The first 5 bottles had no effect on her, so she took another, and then they all began to work at once. Inside of 2 days, she lost 20 pounds, and before the week was out, she could take her waist off over her head without unhooking the collar. She had to cut down all her clothes, and in 2 weeks she was wearing one of her old sleeves for a skirt. Then she got scared and went to a doctor. He looked her all over, and to show you how thin she was, the doctor saw a blue and red mark on her arm that looked like a tattoo. And he asked her what that was. Horton says, "That's a tattoo mark." The doctor says, "That's a funny little tattoo. It looks like a scratch." Horton says, "I know, but when I'm fat, it spells Ferdinand." She was so thin that every time she closed her hand, she would cut the back of her glove. And when she'd eat an olive, everybody would tell her she was getting stout again. The only thing she could eat that wouldn't show on her was spaghetti. And if she ate 2 spaghetti, she'd be ashamed to go out. The doctor said the only thing that would cure her was a sea voyage. So I got the tickets and we took a boat for Newfoundland. And Hortense began to get better at once. She gained 5 pounds a day on that boat, so it's a good thing we didn't sail for Australia. That was a great ship. The first day out, I got acquainted with the bosun. The bosun has a cinch job. All he has to do is to smoke bad tobacco in a pipe. He fills his pipe every morning, goes down to the sailors' boudoirs, and pipes all hands to breakfast. In the afternoon, he pipes off the gamblers in the smoking room, and every evening when the passengers want to sleep, he pipes them off over the transom. Some sailors brag about being to sea, but a good bosun gets to see more than any of them. This bosun knew everything. He told me all about navigation. He said the first thing you had to do was to learn to weigh the anchor. You put the anchor on one side of the scales and a life preserver on the other, and if they balance each other, the ship can sail. After that, the bosun and I got chummy. And to show how much he thought of me, he took me down and introduced me to the bartender. The bartender had been on that boat for 20 years. I asked him if he'd ever saw a sea serpent. And he said no, but a lot of people who come in here have. And sure enough, on my 4th drink, I saw a dozen pink whales, 7 alligators, and a whole flock of sea serpents. When I woke up, I was in my berth. I felt an awful shock, and somebody yelled, "The ship is sinking." I was all dressed, but I thought the ship might sink, so I put on my rubbers and ran out. Men and women were running around just as they got out of bed. The captain hollered down to the bosun to pipe the crew on deck. But the bosun says, "No, I'll stay down here and pipe the girls." I went up to the wireless operator. I knew I was safe up there with him because the vaudeville agents would get him before he could drown. Then the captain ordered all the women in the boats first. One woman wouldn't go. She said the sea was full of sharks. The captain said, "That's all right. They're man-eating sharks, and they won't touch a woman." When all the women were off, the captain ordered all the sailors to man the pump. You see, a sailor don't wear suspenders or a belt. He always has to hitch up his trousers. So a sailor can't pump with both hands without losing something. That's why they always send the women off a sinking vessel first, so the sailors will keep their minds on the pump. The wireless operator showed marvelous presence of mind. He says to me, "We'll drink all we can, and that will make less work for the poor boys at the pump." Then he sent a code message to the bartender, the magic letters RYE, followed by PDQ. Somebody put the captain onto our scheme, and he said, "Great. I'll help you. We may be able to drink the vessel dry."
So that was Hortense at Sea, a kind of rambling monologue by Nat M. Wills. Yeah, what did you make of that?
It took a few little sort of surreal turns there, didn't it? I was kind of thinking, I know where this is going, and it would take a little bit of an odd turn, and you'd leave you a little bit baffled. But he's one of these ones, he just tried to pack as many one-liners, as many one-line jokes into a minute as possible.
I think that was his deal. And I think of him as being this tramp persona, but he doesn't sound like that at all. It sounds like kind of a wisecracking kind of guy instead.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to tie those two things together really, but it's an odd thing.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move on to the popular music, band music. This is a guy called Bohemir Kryl, who was a popular soloist at this time. Can you guess where he's from his name?
Well, with a name like Krill, I would say from the sea, but you know.
No. Kryl.
Right, okay.
It's a different spelling than slightly different. So he was from what's now the Czech Republic or Czechia, but was then the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Right.
And he's born near Prague and emigrated to the USA at some point. And he various jobs, but then he was always playing cornet as well. And he played well enough to be hired by Sousa's band, who were a big deal at this time. Sousa was a rock star of his day, really.
Yeah.
But he was fired by Sousa in 1898 for copying some of the band's music for his own personal use, and straight away went into recording cylinders first of all, then records, and he's quite an amazing soloist. Only a few years he was doing these kind of solos with a backing band, but let's have a listen.
On Cambridge 105 Radio.
Okay, that was Mr. Bohemir Krill with Do Do. It was called D-U-D-U. So have you heard music that sounds like that before?
No, and I was just thinking, because even despite the sort of fairly old recording, there's quite a remarkable sort of clarity of tone in his playing.
I think just the loudness of it means it cuts through.
Right,
That's
okay.
probably what it comes down to. And, you know, they wouldn't call themselves engineers at this point, not for a long time. But they knew how to position it next to the microphone in the right way,
which I
or
guess is a
far
skill
away.
in itself, yeah.
Yeah, and later on when they make the first jazz records, you can really hear who's done proper engineering work on it and who hasn't, because there's such a difference in sound.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can really hear that. I mean, because he's a soloist on this, but he would get together a band and they play kind of Czech traditional music, and it's quite dull later on.
Right.
He was a businessman as well. He kind of knew where his bread was buttered, that kind of thing. So it's a shame he kind of gave up on making this kind of music soon. And he was never interested in jazz or never played jazz. None of these guys did. But his technique was an influence on like Louis Armstrong, Harry James. They would listen to his recordings and copy when they were learning what to sound like, the very early days of jazz. So it was kind of influential in that way. Yeah. And he was known as the robber baron of the music field because of his business talent and frugality. If he arrived and he hadn't been paid his full fee, he was known to cancel concerts, even though the audience was seated already. So, interesting character.
yeah, it certainly sounds it. And as you say, I suppose it still echoes a lot of things what go on with musicians now. You know, you got that balance between the credibility and you know, wanting to do something that you love doing. And then the balance of doing something because you need to earn a wage, you know.
I mean, I don't know why he didn't make it. It wasn't financially viable to keep on playing those solos. It's kind of a shame. The side of music that we really don't hear, unfortunately, it's all these years of this time, is, you know, it's based around New York. It's based around the record company's idea of what to record, which is a white upper middle class American idea of what's good music.
Right.
So it's very limited in the scope of things, and it's a shame because down in New Orleans, you've got the birth of jazz going on right now, and we don't hear anything about it.
Yeah. Because
no one thought to go down there and set up a recording studio, which is insane. But it seems insane now, but it wasn't valued enough to go and do that. Not for another 8 years after this.
Right, okay.
Anyone bothered recording that stuff. But we do have something a little more interesting now. There's I'll give you a bit of background on it first. This is a guy called Polk Miller and the Old South Quartet, and it's called Watermelon Party. So Polk Miller was a white man. He was the son of a Virginian plantation owner and who had slaves, and he learned to play the banjo from his father's slaves. And he was working as a druggist, a pharmacist, when the Civil War broke out, and he took time out from that to fight for the South, the Confederate States of the USA, as an artilleryman in the Civil War. And after the Civil War, in the Reconstruction era, he became a successful businessman, and he launched the Sargent brand of pet care products, which apparently still survives to this day. And it wasn't until the 1890s he began playing music professionally, and not until the 1900s he began touring with his Old South Quartet. So he's in his 60s at this point.
And that's when he started his...
Yeah, he's started performing and touring. And his backing group is 4 black singers, and the music is stories, sketches and songs depicting African American life before the Civil War. So it sounds awful. But this isn't a minstrel show. There wasn't any blackface going on. There wasn't any kind of minstrelry. It was supposed to be as authentic as possible. He was trying to copy what was actually going on the plantation. And they performed to these social clubs, but they also performed to African American churches around the country. And I mean, it's not perfect, but this is the closest thing we've got to capturing this music. And, on this evidence, we're missing quite a bit.
Yeah.
I should say before I play it, he wasn't just a racist. He was an apologist for slavery. And his stated aim was to vindicate the slave-holding classes against the charges of cruelty and inhumanity to the Negro in the old time. So pretty awful guy on that evidence. But it's the only thing we've got that kind of represents this kind of music. And it does perpetuate a series of stereotypes about black people, and it includes multiple uses of the N-word, which I might try to edit out as well. But it does sound as close as we can get to an authentic representation of this time. Anyway, I've talked way too much about this. Let's have a listen. It's Polk Miller and his Old South Quartet with the Watermelon Party.
Now the watermelon party going to be given here tonight. Oh, you talking, Lord, you coming along with me. Get on your good behavior now and don't you ride no bike. Oh, you talking, Lord, you coming along with me. Now the nice roast possum down, sandwiches and ham, some ice cream mackerels and some huckleberry jam. Sweet potatoes and persimmons and some California grapes. All to twist them niggas' appetite and most green of the shade. Everybody, watermelon night, hurry up and cut a knife. Watermelon fine, hurry up and give me wine. Watermelon night, hurry up and cut a knife. Oh, watermelon, won't you give it all to me? Now we're going to have some chickens if the owner ain't around. Oh, you're talking, won't you come along with me? And we're going to have some chocolate made up out of coffee ground. Oh, you're talking, won't you come along with me? Yeah, the catfish and flip-flaps and jumping jacks and hops. Some flip-flops, some ginger snaps, some sarsaparilla pop, and little frog legs all painted green and custard in a cup. And when them niggas see them all, they'll die of standing up. Everybody, watermelon night, hurry up and cut a knife. Watermelon fine, hurry up and give me mine. Watermelon night, hurry up and cut a knife. Oh, watermelon, won't you give it all to me? And nearly all them watermelons at that party going be mine. Oh, you're talking, won't you come along with me? Well, if there's any watches in that crowd, go steal them away in time. Oh, you're talking, won't you come along with me? Why don't dance them old-time Mississippi fling? Cut them Mobile, King Cougar, and the double pigeon wing. Gonna dance the Shotty Sand, the Bazooka, and the Alabama dip. Them fools will have to hold their head right up or lose their upper lip. Everybody, watermelon night, hurry up and cut a knife. Watermelon fine, hurry up and give me wine. Watermelon night, hurry up and cut a knife. Oh, watermelon, won't you give it all to me? Now to sing another verse, indeed we haven't got the time. Oh, you're talking, Lord, you come along with me. Why don't you hear them bells are ringing, them calling me to dine? Oh, you're talking, Lord, you come along with me. Daddy got all them watermelons that cut in pieces of three. And I'm saving all the sweetest and the biggest pieces for me. And if I stay away much longer than I can't get in the line, and nothing will be left for me but watermelon rind. Watermelon night, hurry up and cut a knife. Watermelon fine, hurry up and give me mine. Watermelon night, hurry up and cut a knife. Oh, watermelon, won't you give it all to me? Watermelon night, hurry up and cut a knife. Watermelon fine, hurry up and give me mine. Watermelon night, hurry up and cut a knife. Oh, watermelon, won't you give it all to me?
So that was Polk Miller and the Old South Quartet with Watermelon Party.
Yes.
Quite an odd historical artifact,
Yeah,
I would say.
And that's it. And that's what its worth is a kind of historical document of what things were really genuinely like.
Exactly.
But the joy for me in that, if there is any joy to be found in something like that, is actually the singing, the sort of gospel style singing, which is obviously the
Yeah, I mean, there's all these traces of the roots of what the blues and jazz that's going to come in 10 years' time.
Yeah.
That you can kind of hear hints of in there.
Yeah.
And it's such kind of difficult to pick out these little bits. And you've got to take what you can. Unfortunately, it's as we're getting into this period, it's progressing a bit. We'll get to this kind of hot ragtime a bit later on, where you've got like real like black band leaders. Just in a couple of years after this, we're on the verge of a breakthrough, but we're not quite there. Let's go across the Atlantic Ocean to the UK, shall we? And have some. What's going on in the UK at this time? Do you think that we've got musical? Musical is a big deal at this point. So we're going to have a couple of musical artists. This one, I think this song will be familiar to many people anyway. It's called Boiled Beef and Carrots.
Right.
When I was a nipper, only 6 months old, my mother and my father too, they didn't know what to wean me on. They were in the dreadful stew. They thought of stripe, they thought of steak, or a little bit of old cod row. I said, pop round to the old cook shop, and I tell you what'll make me grow. Boiled beef and carrots, boiled beef and carrots. That's the stuff for your Derby Girl. Makes you fat and it keeps you well. Don't live like vegetarians on food they give to parrots. Blow out your kite from morn till night on boiled beef and carrots. When I got married to Matilda Brown, a funny little girl next door, we went to Brighton for the week, we both settled down once more. My pals all met me in the pub, said a fella to me, what's your afraid? What did you have for your honeymoon? So just for a lark I said, boiled beef and carrots, boiled beef and carrots. That's the stuff for your Derby Girl, makes you fat and it keeps you well. Don't live like vegetarians, food they give to parrots. The wife of mine looks fat and fine on boiled beef and carrots. Now we've got a lodger in the Northful Cove. I'm very, very queer, he said. We sent for the doctor, he came round and told him to jump in bed. The poor chap said, I do feel bad. Then mother with a tear replied, said, what would you like for to pick me up? He jumped out of bed and cried, boiled beef and carrots, boiled beef and carrots. That's the stuff for your Derby Girl, makes you fat and it keeps you well. Don't live like vegetarians, food they give to parrots. Blow out your kite from morn till night on boiled beef and carrots. I'm glad to be the father of a lovely pair of nippers and the nice fat boys. They're twins, you can't tell which is which, like a pair of Saviloys. We had them christened in the week, the father took them on his knee. I said as they've both got ginger hair, I want their names to be boiled beef and carrots, boiled beef and carrots. That's the stuff for your Derby Girl, makes you fat and it keeps you well. Don't live like vegetarians, food they give to parrots. Gentiles and you'd bring up your kids on boiled beef and carrots, boiled beef and carrots, boiled beef and carrots. That's the stuff for your Derby Girl, makes you fat and it keeps you well. Don't live like vegetarians, food they give to parrots. Gentiles and you'd bring up your kids on boiled beef and carrots.
So boiled beef and carrots there, a favourite dish of Mr. Harry Champion.
Yes, yes.
Do you know the name Harry Champion?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the name, but I can't say I'm too familiar with anything other than that particular song.
Well, you might
possibly
be.
the only song that I know that's got cod roe in the lyrics as well.
There's a lot of strange words in there, which I'd like to have a look at, actually. That's the stuff for your Derby Kell. What's a Derby Kell? I've just had a look. It's old Cockney rhyming slang for belly, Derby Kelly.
Right, okay.
What is a Derby Kelly?
I should be using that one in the future.
I've had a look on Wiktionary, the online dictionary, and it says Derby Kelly. So Derby Kell is short for Derby Kelly, and then Derby Kelly doesn't have a definition. So maybe if somebody could explain what that is. But yeah, Harry Champion wasn't his real name. It was William Henry Crump. And
I can understand why he changed it.
Indeed. As well as boiled beef and carrots, he also recorded I'm Henry VIII I Am.
Ah, of course. Yeah.
And Any Old Iron.
Yeah.
And a little bit of Cucumber. That's all his songs. And he had a bit of time off after this, but he had a comeback in the 1930s, and he was really popular again in the 1930s at an old age.
Right.
But died during the Second World War.
Yeah. And you mentioned that's music hall, which was that effectively the English version of vaudeville then? Or?
Yeah, from what I understand, they had a lot of crossover songs going back and forward, but I think vaudeville was it had a stage just for that purpose, but the rules about what you could do on the stage in England were quite different.
Right.
You could put on a play, or you could have songs, and they were licensed to have songs performed. So they'd just come and do a load of songs. They couldn't have sketches and things in between. I think that's the difference between music hall and variety. That's my understanding of that. I might have that wrong, but let's have something else from the musical stage. This is a very interesting one. It's a guy called Billy Williams, and let's have a listen to it and see if you can guess where he's from, because it's a difficult one. He's disguised his accent somewhat.
Here I am again. Little Billy Williams found a penny in the garden one fine summer's day. And as little Billy never had more than a farthing, he said, hip hip hooray. Then passing a tobacconist where cigarettes were sold, there he beheld some little packets coloured green and gold. Billy said, although I'm only 6, I'll be a sport. He toddled in the backer shop, and this is what he bought. 5 little bags in a dainty little packet. 5 cigarettes that cost 1d. 5 little pains underneath his jacket. 5 wobbles in his little Mary. 5 little whips. 5 little jibs as he lay upon the tramway lines, wishing he could touch the cable, looking greener than the label of little Billy's wildwood vines. That's a grand song. I've smoked many a thousand. When Billy puffed the first one, he said, this don't seem a good un, but the next might be all right. And when he lit the second, he said, wish I'd bought plum pudding, or else a paper kite. Why, I never thought the world went round, he murmured at the third. But now I've seen it dancing, I can take my teacher's word. Then at the fourth, he felt so baddy, he cupped with a frown. Smoke ain't so nice a coming up as when it's going down. So 5 little bags in a dainty little packet. 5 cigarettes that cost 1d. 5 little pains underneath his jacket. 5 wobbles in his little Mary. 5 little whips. 5 little jibs as he lay upon the tramway lines. Sadly saying, close the shutter, Willie's dead, but do not utter a word of Billy's wildwood vines. Poor old Bill. I say, poor old Bill. Little Billy Williams, he lay flatter than a flounder, full of misery. Suddenly, along the road came P.C. Binns the bounder. What's up here? Said he. Then, lighting his bullseye, he disclosed the shocking fact that Willie had been smoking right against the latest act. He picked up all the evidence those half-smoked woodbines bore, and scowled as little Willie said, please, sir, I've just one more. So once cigarette in a dainty little packet. One cigarette that costs 1D. One little pain underneath his jacket. One wobble in his little Mary. One little whip. One little jip as he lay upon the tramway line. The poor kid felt like dying, and the policeman, he was crying. But that copper stole his last woodbine. Poor old Billy Williams.
So that was Wild Woodbines, performed by Billy Williams, a comedy song about a 6-year-old boy smoking a packet of cigarettes. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So I don't think you would get that these days.
No.
Not at all. I mean, they weren't aware of the health consequences of smoking at that point. I should mention that, of course. But it does sound kind of shocking all the same.
Yeah.
That's a thing that making a joke record about. But yeah, that's Billy Williams. Did you guess where he's from?
I didn't have a clue. I did notice he's got a really unusual way of rolling his R's.
Yeah, he does.
In his lyrics, but I couldn't pinpoint where he's from originally.
So yeah, he's Australian. There's an Australian singer who's pretending to put on an English accent to go on the musical stage.
I was thinking more regional accents within the UK, so I would never have got as far as Australia.
Yeah, it's a strange thing he's kind of constructed for himself there. So yeah, he got popular in Australia, and then he came over to the UK and became very popular around this time. 1910, 1912. He was in the Royal Command Performance as one of the big people in that, which was actually, it was on then as well. That's been on forever apparently. And he overindulged, and he died in 1914 in Hove, aged 37. You know, you think about we have musicians out there, like there's a new like Paul McCartney album out or whatever, and they've been recording for 60 years now. It's a different world that you wouldn't have somebody being popular for 30 or 40 years because they'd be dead. Yeah. So it's terrible, really.
I mean, we do have musicians that die tragically young.
Oh, we still do.
It's
some,
because of, I mean, when you think of people like Kurt Cobain, for example.
Oh, yeah.
John Lennon, who had his life taken away at a very young age, you know.
Yeah.
Still happens, but not through necessarily the same reasons that they would have done 100 or so years ago.
Yeah, and I don't think people had... You know, it's quite often it's not the lifestyle back then. It's just they went for an operation or something like that,
and it just went horribly wrong.
Or it was before the years of antibiotics. So if you got sick, you just got sick, really. Terrible. Anyway, some horrible things about that. Let's listen to one final thing from the world of musical. This is Jack Pleasance, and Jack Pleasance is a northern musical comedian. He's from Bradford, but you wouldn't really guess it from his voice. He puts on a character, which he was called the Bashful Limit, the Bashful Fool, right. Whose ostensible lack of experience with women could turn out to reveal hidden purpose. So quite a sinister idea for a musical character.
Right.
Let's see what you think of him. Very, very odd character.
I went to an unemployed meeting one night, and I knew what the speaker was saying was right. With no work to do, we are hungry, he said, and our women and children are starving for bread. And I said, hooray! On a stretcher they took me away. And when I woke up in their hospital bed, they were sticking tin plates in the top of my head. And the doctor exclaimed, why, the poor fellow's dead. And I said, hooray! One day with the missus, I went to the zoo. And just 'cause I said, dear, that monkey's like you, she chased me all round, and for fighting she shaped. But in with the lions I ran and escaped, and I said, hooray, for safe with the lions I lay. The wife said, you coward, the lioness she, made one mighty spring, said the lion let him be. I married myself, he has my sympathy, and I said, hooray. Now, I've been expecting a family event, and last Monday evening, as homeward I went, a young man came up and he said with a cough, you'd best hurry up, 'cause I think it's come off. And I said, hooray, and I ran to the wife all the way. A man said, there's 3 of them. I said, oh, Lord. When I got to the house, someone whispered, there's 4. Then they showed me the cat in a box full of straw, and I said, hooray.
So that was Jack Pleasance with I Said Hooray. What did you make of that man? He sounds quite sinister, I think.
He sounds quite sinister. He sounded like the kind of voice that somebody that, like Harry Seacombe or Peter Sellers or the Spike Milligan might put on as one of their characters. And it also had a little bit of a otherworldly, a surreal, sinister, as you said, kind of sound and content to it as well.
Slightly
a bit unnerving, really.
Kind of psychotic, I think. Yeah. The feeling I have. What's this man capable of? I can kind of understand it, but I don't think it's funny.
No.
At this point, I wouldn't laugh at it. I just kind of find it slightly concerning. That's all.
Yes. Dark, very dark.
So I'm not going to play any more comedy. So what do you think has been the funniest from the things? There's been quite a lot of comedy stuff for some reason this year. I think.
I wonder why that would be. Was it just a phase that we're going through? 1909? What was it? I can't think of.
I think there's kind of a lack of interesting music. So it's kind of I'm playing a lot of novelty records for that reason.
Oh right, okay.
I think there's been a bit. Let's have some interesting music instead of just novelty records. That's a good point. Okay, this is Charles Draper. He's the grandfather of English clarinetists, not literally, and it's called Concertino. So I imagine it's a piece put together from other pieces. When they name things like that, it's usually the case. So that was Concertino, performed by Charles Draper, a British classical clarinetist. More showing off on the instruments. I think it's a theme of music that sounds good to my ear from this era, really.
Yeah. I mean, that struck me as something that sounds like it's a very seriously good musician who's just trying to be a little bit not playful, just trying to do something a little bit different, but maybe not quite achieving what he wants to achieve.
Possibly, yeah. I think he's just putting together a lot of showpieces. It's called it Concertino, which is like a little concert. So I think he's just picked out the best bits because he's got one chance to record a cylinder, so he's just doing his party pieces.
Yeah.
Which is it's nice to hear it. I think it's good later on when they manage to get those things put together, where they sound like there's more of a plan. Right now it seems like it's lots of interesting dead ends.
Yeah,
I'd say that's the Edwardian era. Lots of very nice dead ends that are not going to lead on to jazz.
And
really.
Was that partly because of the restrictions that they had in how they could record?
I'd say so. I think it's the kind of stranglehold of the music industry as it was. There's very few labels,
right?
And they're going. They're just recording what they want to. The bosses of the company who they've got very conservative tastes, and they're deciding what's recorded, and it's not going to be anything. Well, at least we've got this kind of like vaudeville and musical things.
Yeah.
That's something they can do that's got like a proven popularity, you know.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's a lot of opera. There's a lot, which I think I'll skip on this week. But I usually play one thing, but I'm not going to bother this time if that's okay. But that's because that's proper music. That's the idea.
Yeah.
So what do you record? Proper music. What's proper music? It's a tenor singing an aria. You know, like that's what you should listen to. Although we have ethnographers who are going around the world with their recording horns, recording in different places. So our penultimate thing today. This is banjo instrumental. The banjo is kind of an interesting thing that goes around the world. I don't know if it's actually a banjo. I think it's an Indian instrument that they're calling a banjo. And as every virtuoso was called Professor at this time, this is Professor Cowcub with a banjo instrumental Bhopali. It's from a CD called Indian Talking Machine on the Sublime Frequencies label. Lots of interesting stuff from India on there. Alright, so that was Professor Cowcub with Banjo Instrumental Bhopali from the year 1909. What did you make of that?
I can just imagine wigging out on stage to that,
Yeah.
Yeah, flailing around as he's building to a bit of crescendo. It sounds almost, you mentioned Indian music, almost like a sitar as much as a banjo.
I think it's quite likely to be a sitar. I don't think he's going to have a banjo.
No.
I think someone's just been there and like, oh, that looks a bit like a banjo. I'll call it a banjo.
Yeah, and he had quite a manic rhythm.
Yeah, there was a rhythm going on underneath it,
Yeah.
and I've been trying to place it what it sounds like, and I've worked it out just a second ago. It sounds like Paul Simon's The Obvious Child.
Yeah.
It's exactly that same going on underneath. I'm sure there's no connection. It's just they've come across that same rhythm independently of each other, because that's a South African musicians. There is a South African Indian connection now I think about it. So I don't know. Maybe that's a new discovery of something that's going on there.
Yeah.
Maybe they got that.
Certainly, very interesting sounds. Anyway.
Yeah, I love that. And it's good that they were going out around the world recording different things. But I wish they'd had the same standard in the USA, so they could have got some of that original jazz as it was happening. You know.
On Cambridge 105 Radio.
You've been listening to Centuries of Sound on Cambridge 105 Radio. I've been James Errington.
And I've been Dave Hammond.
And if you want to find out more about Centuries of Sound, you can come along to my website. It's at centuriesofsound.com. And I've got mixes for every year until the year 1920 up there now. So you can have a listen to all of those, and also mixes for the years 2016 and 2017. If you want to hear where the project's heading. If you want to contact me, if you've got any feedback, you can email me at james@centuriesofsound.com. And I'm on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram like everyone else. What do you have coming up soon that we can listen to?
Okay, so on December the 30th, I will have my Albums of the Year show. So I'll be choosing my 30 top albums as played on the Smelly Flower Pot on Cambridge 105 over the previous 12 months.
So we're going to finish off today with the Edison Concert Band. Edison was the only label recording on cylinders, so they had the whole market there for cylinders, really. So this is the In the Hall of the Mountain King, which is a piece of music. It's a grieg, and it was composed in 1875 as incidental music for the Ibsen's play Peer Gynt. Part of Peer Gynt, and I'm sure everyone will recognise it when you hear it. It doesn't sound familiar, but it's a very familiar piece that you'll know from cartoons, I think. You'll find out in a moment. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure, and it's been great listening to some of the music as well.
Okay, good to hear. And thank you all for listening. Good night.
If you want to get hold of these a year earlier and also get full downloads of mixes and a load of other bonus stuff, then why not sign up to my Patreon at patreon.com/centuriesofsound for just $5 per month. Right now my supporters there are listening to the show on 1920 featuring Janiver Magnus. That's patreon.com/centuriesofsound.